All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. A lot of news out of Dallas. Of course, training camp was an off day for the Cowboys players yesterday. No practice. Of course, there was no bad news on the injury front. We got a few updates there, some Cowboys moves, some exciting stuff to get into. Very interesting, and of course, the big news of the day continues to revolve around the left tackle position with offensive lineman Tyler Guyton out for the rest of training camp, the rest of preseason, and maybe week one. It leads us to the question, who will be playing left tackle for Dallas in the interim and potentially against the Philadelphia Eagles for their first matchup of the season? A lot of people, myself included, assumed the natural backup would be Asim Richards, but another guy has moved into the mix to be the first string tackle, at least in the interim. Let's pull up this article right here, first story of the day. This is a courtesy of John Machota over at The Athletic, great reporter. You should give a follow on X. Cowboys Executive Vice President Stephen Jones on 105.3 The Fan said Nate Thomas will probably be the starting left tackle until Tyler Guyton returns. He's having a really good camp for us. He has exceeded expectations. He's serious-minded about what he's doing out there. We do feel like we have some good players that can certainly do the job. All right, this is a little bit of curveball, a little bit of a wrench, right? Like I said, everyone just assumed it would be Asim Richards. And yesterday I highlighted some of Richards' data in terms of what he did in limited playing time last year and said, listen, you could do a lot worse. But when you talk about Nathan Thomas, and we actually covered him on this channel about a week or so ago, and we said, listen, Coach Schottenheimer had come out and said, we like what he's doing. He did a good offseason. We liked him last year before the injury struck. And we broke down the data with Thomas. And let's get into today's chart of the day, stat of the day, whatever you want to call it. Here, let me pull it up on the screen for you guys. So this is Nathan Thomas versus 2023 peers. So we're going back to last year, right? Guys that played college football in 2023, drafted in 2024. And let's look at their grades, courtesy of Pro Football Focus. And the three guys to compare Thomas against are Blake Fisher to Houston, Roger Rosengarten to Baltimore, and DJ Glaze to the Las Vegas Raiders. All three of these guys played. All three of these guys are at least very good backups or starters, quality starters for the respective teams. But when you look at Nathan Thomas, again, on the far right, he was a 7th-round pick. Fisher, Rosengarten were second-rounders. Glaze was a 3rd-rounder. You can see, looking at their PFF grades, that Nathan Thomas holds up very well. Blue is their overall grade. Red is their pass blocking. Gold is their run blocking. You can see Thomas is the best run blocker of the group, and he's the best overall grade of the group. You talk about a potential steal last year. That's what you're talking about. Pass protection, not as good as the other guys. That's where he takes a step back, but still very competent, just shy of 75. Both Glaze and Rosengarten had really good pass protection grades. He was basically about the same as Blake Fisher, who was a good quality backup tackle, got some starting opportunities for Houston last year. So Nathan Thomas, on an analytical level, was just as good as these three offensive linemen, these three guys that stepped up in a big way for their teams as rookies. Thomas was unfortunately hurt last season, so we got none of that last year. But now he has an entire offseason. He's worked on his body, his physique, his technique. He's put in a lot of time, and we're seeing a lot of praise among Cowboys coaches and players about Nathan Thomas's development. He's a guy to keep an eye on, folks. He has a chance to take advantage of this opportunity and be a breakout big-time player for Dallas. And I'm not saying he's going to replace Guyton. I mean, maybe, but I doubt that. But when you talk about a key swing tackle, and we covered this about a week ago when we first brought up Thomas, you need that in today's NFL just for depth reasons, for 3 tackle packages. And it looks like Nathan Thomas, again, second-year guy, rookie season last year, devastated because of that knee injury. He has an opportunity here to build off the momentum. It looks like the Cowboys will slide him in to be the first string tackle over the coming weeks. Excited to see how he does. He's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And again, when you look at the data, the unbiased data, not my opinion, it's just the performance. Looking at the raw numbers here, you can see that he has a high level potential. We would have called him a potential steal target last year. Obviously, the injuries derailed that chance, but he still has that capability. Really excited to see what Thomas does going forward. All right, moving on here. This is courtesy of Voice of the Star, which is Patrick Walker. There was a press conference with Clayton Adams, the offensive coordinator, and talking about O-line versatility. He was asked about that, and Adams said, unless you're an all-pro at left guard, you need to be able to play multiple spots. So that is obviously a direct mention of Tyler Smith, who, of course, is the best offensive lineman the Dallas Cowboys have. He is an all-pro at left guard, exactly who Adams is referring to. So basically what he's saying is, says, one, Smith ain't moving, right? He's great at left guard. He's one of the best in the business at it. We're not moving him around. You know, a lot of people said, well, with Guyton out, do you move Smith to left tackle? Do you just kind of rejigger the offensive line as a whole? He's like, not going to happen. We got a guy. We have a stud at left guard in Tyler Smith. We're not messing with success there. And that is 100% the right approach. Sometimes what happens, and I understand why teams do this, but I think it's short-sighted. They have issues at a particular offensive line position. The Chiefs last year were a great example of this. Left tackle was a disaster area for them. They had a really good left guard in Joe Thuney. They said, listen, we'll move Joe Thuney out to left tackle. We feel like the backup left guard is a little bit better than the backup left tackle, so we'll do that situation. Thuney's a better guard than tackle significantly, but overall, in terms of just raw talent on the field, we get a little bit better as an offensive line. And I understand why you think that, especially because of the critical nature of the left tackle. But that's actually not how it works. And we saw that in the Super Bowl actually against Philadelphia. Football is a game of matchups. It's what position versus the opposition. Do you have a clear matchup advantage or disadvantage? Tyler Smith moving out to left tackle against good pass rushers because he's a left guard is still going to be a mismatch disadvantage for Dallas. So you're taking away what 99% of the time will be an advantage for Dallas and moving out to left tackle where in the games and the plays that matter, like against the Eagles, it will still be a disadvantage. But if you keep him at left guard and have, let's say, Thomas or whoever be there at left tackle week one, you're at a disadvantage at left tackle, that's true, but you're also an advantage now at left guard. So it doesn't necessarily wash out perfectly depending on the play and the situation, but it has a chance to. If you move Smith out, you're at a disadvantage at left guard, and you've got a good chance of being a disadvantage at left tackle with Smith at that position against quality pass rushers. So you went from maybe a washout, maybe a net neutral, to most likely a net negative. And that's what happened to the Kansas City Chiefs against the Philadelphia Eagles. They had moved their all-pro left guard to left tackle, and they were at a disadvantage at left guard and at left tackle. The wheels fell off, and they got absolutely obliterated. Clayton Adams taking the right approach here. And also he's looking at the rest of the offensive line and saying, listen, the star guy, Smith, he gets a little preferential treatment. Jimmy Johnson used to do this all the time. He was like, listen, stars are going to be treated like stars. They're going to be coached like stars. There's going to be a lot of high expectations of them, but the stars will be treated a certain way because they've earned it, right? Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman, all these guys get treated a certain way because they've earned it with their effort and performance on the field. The other offensive linemen in this group outside of Smith, they haven't earned it yet. Beebe, Hoffman, Steele, right? Go across the board here. Booker, Guyton, Thomas, Richards, go across the board here. They haven't earned it yet. They have not earned the reward of not having to play a bunch of positions and learning a bunch of things and doing a lot of hard things. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to put Terrence Steele at, center or something like that. But it means that, listen, if you want to have the comfort and comfort of, staying at one position, you don't have to worry about flexibility, then step up your game. I love that as an incentive structure because especially when you have guys who have played a lot of football like Terrence Steele or guys who were a starter last year like Cooper Beebe, you can get a little complacency. Here's sort of a message saying, hey, you got a long way to go. There's a chance, Cooper Beebe, maybe you don't even start. Maybe Hoffman beats you out. Who knows? And Terrence Steele, if Nathan Thomas does good during this training camp, maybe he replaces you when Guyton comes back, right? You're trying to keep people on your toes, keep incentivizing people, especially as you get deeper into training camp and it becomes just a grind and a slog. Really like this here from Clayton Adams. All right, next, also from Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star, talking to Clayton Adams on the use of pre-snap motion. It can create some chaos with defensive IDs, and if it gives us information, it's 100% worth it. We need to manufacture adversity. And that last sentence there is, that's a good line. I love that line. I'm going to steal that. But that is so true. One of the problems with Mike McCarthy's offense, he did very little motion, and even if he did, it was sort of informational, right? Running back goes out wide and then comes back into the backfield to say, okay, it's man or zone or whatever coverage, which is helpful, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't manufacture, as Clayton Adams here, adversity, opportunities for your offense. You want to make life hard for the defense. You want to make life hard for the opposition. Don't make it easy for them. This is famously what Bill Belichick did in New England. He always would say, it became a cliche, and I don't understand why other teams didn't do this, but you say, we're going to take away what other teams do well. If you've got a great tight end, we're going to double team him and make it really hard. If you've got a great receiver, we'll put 2 guys on him. If you're a great running team, we'll put 8 in the box, right? And listen, if you beat us with what you're bad at, hey, good on you. Reward. You win the game. Good job. Congrats to you. But we're not going to make it easy for you. And the Mike McCarthy-led Dallas Cowboys offensively made it super easy for the opposition. It was a lot of, hey, we're going to line up and play this West Coast offense style where we've seen these route combinations, these formations for decades at this point, right? Everyone's got a million film on this, right? Everyone knows what's coming, and we're going to make it really easy for you to play defense. You're going to know what's coming. Hey, maybe you can't cover CeeDee Lamb, maybe you can't cover Ferguson, maybe Prescott does amazing things, and sometimes that can happen, it's like in 2023. But when we saw in 2024, a lot of times it won't. And actually what we saw in the postseason in big games, even before 2024 was an indication there were serious flaws in that thinking. I like Clayton Adams. You got Coach Schottenheimer following the same track. We're trying to make it hard for the defense. It sounds so obvious, and this was what was so frustrating at times with the Cowboys strategies. Make it hard. Tom Landry pioneered this in the 1960s when he invented the multiple offense system from his time with the New York Giants. Landry gets a lot of credit for the flex defense, again, trying to make it hard for the offense. But his offensive strategy was very similar with the motions, the shifts, make it hard for the defense to know what's coming, make them react, make them play on their heels, make them have to constantly think and look around. Again, manufacturing adversity. That's in the Cowboys' DNA from birth, for God's sakes. Mike McCarthy just steered completely away from it. Nothing against Mike McCarthy. Obviously, he won a lot of games in Dallas. I wish him well the rest of his career, whatever he does. But this was a massive deficiency in his strategy. My personal opinion, really glad to see Clayton Adams taking a different approach. All right, next story here. This is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Cowboys Executive Vice President Stephen Jones said on 105.3 The Fan, it is accurate that the team has had extension talks with cornerback DaRon Bland. Been in those talks, is he a slot or outside corner? Jones said he's versatile. Anytime you're versatile in this league, you're valuable. He's a guy we think a lot of. Yeah, so I think one of the narratives going around with Dallas, especially what happened last offseason with CeeDee Lamb and Prescott, and of course with Parsons overhanging the whole situation, is that they slow walk deals and extensions. And they've made a concerted effort to make sure that doesn't happen. They locked down Oso Adichie. They locked down Jake Ferguson a couple days ago. They seem to be actively engaged with DaRon Bland. Look, there are a lot of issues with Micah Parsons. I think Adam Schefter came out yesterday and said, listen, the teams are still very far apart. And I think they agreed on a framework of a deal a few months ago, but they can't get down to the actual key components, right? I think it's, how much total guaranteed money or how much per year. There's a lot of big delta there. Honestly, when it comes to the Parsons thing, I would not be surprised when it's all said and done if Dallas lets this year play out and then franchise tags him and then resets in 2 years. That may be what they end up doing, in which case Micah Parsons will probably fire his agent because that will cost him a lot of money, because then there's a lot of risk. Injuries happen, things happen. I think right now Jerry Jones and the Jones family, they have a lot better negotiation position than people give them credit for, and they're sticking to their guns. Great credit. We saw this with the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson, by the way. Hendrickson reported to camp for Cincinnati. He got tired of the holdout. We're seeing leverage go away. Even Terry McLaurin, wide receiver for Washington, he was on a holdout. He's come back to camp as well as a hold-in for the Commanders. So again, we're seeing that the teams actually have leverage. Jones sticking to their guns. It's why I think the Parsons camp, at least his agent, a little frustrated. I think Parsons will play. He'll eventually get paid. The question is, how many years will it take him to get his contract? But I don't think he's going anywhere. I think that's pretty much set in stone, because we know, again, based on this reporting here, that the Cowboys, they like their players. They like the guys they drafted. Jerry Jones has his guys, you're a Cowboy, right? That's how he likes these things. DaRon Bland working on a deal, obviously a good sign. Phenomenal 2023, injuries derailed 2024. He is a competent corner in the NFL. Now, is he an elite all-pro guy? I'm a little concerned there that 2023 was sort of, you can't repeat that, right? You can't break an NFL record every single season. But I think he's a good ball hawk. I think he can make plays. I think he's a clutch player. We saw that with the strip against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win that game. Is he an elite corner? Is he the best? No, right? I think that's fair. I think he's a big play guy and does a lot of good things. I don't think he's the best corner really on this team. If you're talking about lockdown, giving up completions, to me, he's almost the perfect number two. He's a guy that teams, if he's your number two corner or a nickel corner, he can be incredibly valuable because teams don't want to throw the football at him because he's just a turnover machine and can return those for touchdowns. So if your number two guy is like that, you're like, okay, we got to throw it at their number one corner, right? We got to throw it at Diggs, right? It creates all kind of problems. Or at that point, okay, we can't throw it at their number two guy. We can't throw it at their number one guy. Let's go to number three guy. And I just got sacked, right? That's sort of the strategy the Cowboys are trying to implement. I think they're trying to lock down DaRon Bland. Again, it'll come down to the particulars, but I think DaRon Bland's camp is probably a little realistic after 2024. Maybe more like a Ferguson kind of deal where he doesn't come remotely close to setting the market, but still a good, solid deal. That's what I predict coming from DaRon Bland. Glad to see the Cowboys working on this. And again, talking about valuable, being very publicly praising. Love to see that from the leadership. Again, the Jones family takes a lot of criticism, and rightly so a lot of the time, but they do a lot of good moves as well. They stick up for their guys. guys. That's why they get so much praise from former players all of the time. They may be critical of the Cowboys' performance and win-loss and things like that, but no one is critical when it comes to the Joneses personally, obviously, unless they have to be for like a talking head on ESPN and the Cowboys just got killed in the game. That's a different situation. But it's very clear that the Jones family really tries to do what they can to make sure they pay their good players, and it looks like that's what they're doing right here with DaRon Bland. All right, next up here, this is again at Voice of the Star, Patrick Walker. Osa Odigizua, to me, when I asked about what impresses him most about Cowboys rookie second-round pick, Donovan Ezeraku. Patrick Walker here then basically quoted Odigizua with all of the grammar issues aside here. Ezzy's nice. I'm not going to lie. He's very athletic. He's got good strength to him too. Despite what some might say about his size, he's sneaky strong. I feel like he's a good addition. He's smart as well and very disciplined. I feel like he's someone who's going to be able to come in and help us a lot. All right, there's kind of a video going a little bit viral about Walker asking Osa Odigizua this question, and as he's answering, Odigizua kind of has this like grin, like this like, hey, yeah, this guy's something good, right? And I think we look at Ezeraku as sort of this. He's done a lot of good things in camp, was considered a steal when the Cowboys selected him. Now we're seeing the players talk about him. There's a chance there's something special here. I don't remember this kind of praise with DeMarcus Lawrence early in his career. I don't remember this kind of thing with Randy Gregory, certainly not with Marshawn Nealon last year. And again, it's early. We're only, a chunk of practices in, haven't played a single preseason game. You're talking about excited to see this kid in preseason. When we start doing film reviews, and we got those coming in the preseason, so stay tuned to that. I'm excited to break down this kid. I think what he does against actually NFL tackles, even if it's just preseason, will be very interesting to see, certainly in passing situations. But it's very clear the Cowboys believe they got a great player here. This is more than just, camp hype, in terms of a guy, a rookie. Hey, he's made an interception today. Or, hey, look, he's all over the field. Or, hey, he's picking up the defense quickly. This is like, hey, this guy's a player. And he's got a lot of opportunities with Parsons, of course, not practicing. And that's been one of the benefits in a weird way with this sort of Parsons hold-in situation. You're having guys get a lot of reps. Sam Williams coming back from the injury, getting a lot of reps. Ezeraku getting a lot of reps. Love to see that. Nealon getting a lot of reps. We're seeing a lot of these young Cowboys, right? These guys 25 and younger. Obviously, Dante Fowler returning into the fold. And, of course, we have a new defensive scheme with Eberflus taking control here. But we're seeing a lot of these young Cowboys get a lot of opportunities and taking advantage of them. That's one of the things that can happen sometimes. And when this happens, don't undersell the fact that Parsons, obviously, he knows he's one of the best players in football. But when he sees guys at his position making plays in training camp and getting praise, and it's not him, any competitor, anybody who looks at that will be like, hey, I need to get back on the field because that's my spot. I'm the edge rusher, right? I'm tired of hearing about Donovan Ezeraku. I'm tired of hearing about Dante Fowler. I'm tired of hearing about Marshawn Nealon looks better in year 2. I'm tired of hearing about Sam Williams coming back from injury. Looks really explosive and doing a lot of good things. This is my position. This is my defense. I'm going to come back. Don't discount that, folks. I think Parsons, he's going to start hearing these vibes. He's going to start calling his agent. He's going to say, hey, listen, I want to get back on the field. Let's get this thing done. If not, let's just punt it to next offseason. I know I'm going to get tagged, and we'll approach that when the time comes. I think that's what's going to happen in Dallas. So, again, this is sort of a double-hinged effect here. We got Ezeraku doing great things, impressing Odigizua, impressing everyone. He's off to a phenomenal start. Looks like a great addition to the Cowboys defense. But I think before long, Parsons will get tired of hearing this, and he'll want to return to the fold as well. So there's a lot of good with Ezeraku in this edge rush position, who, like I said last week, or yesterday, this is one of the parts of this team that has championship caliber talent. Edge rusher, defensive line, getting after the quarterback. When Parsons returns to the fold, this may be the best group in the NFL at doing that. All right, moving right along. This is a tweet response to Adam Schefter. So you can start at the bottom here, then we'll work up. The Cowboys are signing former Ravens quarterback Christian Matthew per Jerusalem House and Robert Bailey. And then Brandon Lohr responded to that, said quarterback Christian Matthew played in 2 games during the 2023 season with the Chicago Bears. Head coach at the time was Matt Eberflus, a flyer in depth for the preseason games. Yeah, so this is on the back of Kalen Carson, has hyperextended his knee. For those of you who aren't familiar, he's going to miss the next 4 to 6 weeks. Diggs is at this point. Week 1, it really seems to probably be a no-go for Diggs, even though it's a very fluid situation. They expect him now, the way things are going, to return in September. So probably going to miss week 1, likely week 2 as well, if I had to guess. So maybe week 3 time for Diggs. So the first 2 games of the season, to be realistic, are going to be really, really light at corner. Now look, the Kalen Carson injury is not ideal. But if we're being totally honest here, what Carson showed last year during the regular season, And he hasn't really stood out so far in camp. Now, it's early and I don't want to be too bummed about it, but it doesn't look like he's going to turn out to be an elite, starting caliber corner. Like, that's just what we've seen so far. Regular season, no real anything special this offseason so far through camp. Now injured. So, nothing against the kid, but the reality is the cornerback position seems to be DaRon Bland being the number one guy, and it's going to be Kaiir Elam. It's going to be Israel. You got Andrew Booth coming in there. I think that's a little scary to me. Right, if we're being totally honest, looking at this cornerback position with Revel, he's not coming back anytime soon. I'm thinking, maybe Thanksgiving. You got Hall, Keeman Hall's another guy in there. This is a very light cornerback room, and one of the things that can happen when you get very light in depth is that you have a lot of guys, having to play all through training camp, all through the preseason. Like, you don't have enough bodies. You need to have corners you can throw out there in the second half of your first preseason game. But do you want Keeman Hall, a guy who's going to potentially have to start for you, potentially be your number 3 corner, to play a lot of reps? Do you want him to play half a preseason game and risk injury there? No, of course not. So what do? You bring in a veteran corner. You don't want to bring in a guy that you think will actually cost you a lot of money, or a guy that's, going to be an ego-driven guy that's not going to want to play the second half of a preseason game. You bring in a guy that's just looking for an opportunity. That's what Matthew is. He knows the Eberflus scheme, so you're talking about a guy that you don't have to spend a lot of effort in terms of coaching up, getting him ready, right? Because one of the things that can happen when you bring in a veteran, you now have to, if he doesn't know the scheme, you now have to take time out of your day if you're a defensive coach and teach him the terminology, teach him the calls, teach him the coverages, teach him all that kind of stuff. Instead, Matthew's a guy that can line up literally today for Dallas, knows what Eberflus wants from his corners, know how he calls the plays. He can just line up today and go out and execute. Now, look, is he going to be a star or even a guy who make the team? Probably not. But you talk about a camp body, a preseason body that could potentially be an emergency corner the first couple weeks of the season. I think that's what Matthew is likely to be. I know a lot of people look at Dallas and say, well, why don't you bring in a Stephon Gilmore or something like that? Listen, there's a reason some of these veteran guys aren't available right now, okay? It's because their cost versus ego versus performance doesn't align. That's just the truth, right? You bring in a Rasul Douglas or something like that, there's a reason he's available. Doesn't mean they can't do things in a pinch. Doesn't mean they can't have one good game. But if you look at a 17-game season, you can't sacrifice, the development of a Hall or a Kaiir Elam, guys that you think are specifically Elam that are doing good things. There's actually reports that Andrew Booth is having a pretty good camp. Now, Andrew Booth was such a disaster area last season. I mean, just what he did in some of these games was just absolutely atrocious. One of the worst corners I've ever seen. Nothing against Booth. It just was bad. So I am putting that Andrew Booth praise completely to the side with a big old, I don't really think so. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But again, if you look at this cornerback room and say, okay, if it's Bland, if it's Hall, and then if it's Kaiir Elam, and then you got Israel in the slot, that's not a good cornerback group at all. But you can survive. You just need a few depth guys that can get through the preseason, get some camp bodies in there, and that's what Matthew is going to be, right? And I think if Kaiir Elam, who's doing good things right now for Cowboys camp, can be one of the 3, and you work around and figure out a way to get a bunch of different other bodies on the field, you can make it work for a game or two as you're waiting for Bland to return, Butler to return, right? The rest of the crew, eventually Revel will get into the fold. Cornerback with the injuries was a huge issue. Same thing with linebacker with Overshown, of course. Getting through the first few weeks of the season will be critical at this position. I think the Cowboys getting a camp body, preseason body right here, this is a way to lighten the load on some of these other guys that they think are actually be contributors like Elam, like Hall. All right, moving on to our next story here. This is, again, courtesy of John Machota over The Athletic. Cowboys wide receiver George Pickens on 105.3 The Fan on being excited about getting the ball with an opportunity to run after the catch. A lot more dig routes. That's what I feel like a lot of other teams, they don't want to implement it because you got a running back, you got this. But the Cowboys run a lot of digs, and it's all off Dak. It's what he likes, definitely on the move, let alone the deep ball. Yeah, so it's very interesting. So Pickens, if you look at his time in Pittsburgh, they basically used him, I don't want to say almost predominantly, but as a 50-50 ball down the field vertical attacker, right? And he's very, very good at that. But one of the things I think Dallas lacked, honestly, last season was that intermediate middle of the field threat. Now, CeeDee Lamb can do that and has, but you don't want a guy like CeeDee Lamb with his after-the-catch ability and his creativity to be constantly running deep in-breaking routes, deep seams. Like, that's not necessarily his. He certainly can do it, but I don't know if I want him to do that all the time, especially coming off the shoulder injury. But you look at a guy like Pickens with his more physical nature, his sort of aggressiveness, he's much closer to, let's say, a Dez Bryant mold than CeeDee Lamb is in terms of just overall demeanor and affect as a wide receiver. And I think he's excited to get these opportunities. And this is where things can really come together for Dallas with his 1-2 punch at wide receiver, especially if they can run the football more. So if you get to a situation where you have to run the ball more, you bring a safety into the box, someone's got to account for Ferguson, you look at the middle of the field, the seams, the way to attack defenses, start to get open. Those dig routes, they become there. When you can't run the football, it's a lot harder, right? When you don't have good receivers like Pickens who can then also threaten vertically, it also gets harder. But you have a guy in Pickens who can do both, attack and beat you vertically over the top. Then he wants to be over the middle, yards after catch opportunities. I think that's a great sign for Dallas because once again, one of the biggest issues with the Cowboys passing game last season, outside of course, this is before Prescott got hurt, we'll say that, and of course CeeDee Lamb was spectacular, is they had zero big play generation outside of Lamb, and that made it almost impossible to operate. They had to methodically move the football 6, 7, 8 yards at a time down the field. Cooks, obviously with the injury early in the season, and the other wide receivers, they just weren't ready. They just didn't step up. They could not get it done. Having a guy that can make intermediate plays and then yards after catch, turn them into big explosive plays will be huge for Dallas. It's a great sign that Pickens is seeing those opportunities. It's great that the Dallas also see those opportunities for Pickens. We're seeing a great alignment here of what both guys in terms of Prescott and Pickens here are good at. Offensive coordinator recognizing it as well, giving them opportunities in camp. We're seeing Pickens very early on get integrated successfully into this offense. Don't discount the quality of the Cowboys coaching staff for getting this done. Not always easy, especially for new guys. You have an entire new staff, a new offensive strategy, new everything basically with Clayton Adams coming into the fold here. Your entire mentality as a team, as an offense has changed. When you have that much volatility, it's really hard to successfully integrate outside players as well. The Cowboys, reportedly, are getting it done. So again, great job by the Cowboys coaching staff across the board. Really solid effort here. Excited to see what Pickens can do with some of these dig routes and more yards after catch opportunities this upcoming season. All right, that's enough of the news. Again, a little bit of a slower day without practice yesterday. Let's get into the comments here. For those of you who aren't familiar, I'll respond to any comments or questions from today's video and tomorrow's video. So I'm going to answer your questions and comments from yesterday's video. So again, if you have anything, put it in the comment section below. I'll make sure to address it tomorrow. This first one is from Damon Blackfire 2.049. That's an interesting handle. Talking about the Deion Blue, I call hit piece that was ran against before training camp. He's doing some great things in training camp. And the comment says, I basically say it's a fabricated, it's a false report, it's a hit piece. The comment says completely fabricated. So you're saying the guy just lied that he didn't have someone express concern about Blue's work ethic. To me, you are calling a guy a liar. Am I wrong? I am calling him a liar, right? If he had anonymous sources, he didn't name his sources, right? If I sit there and post, like you guys have seen this entire video at this point, when I put out a report that I see, I show the guy who said it. I show Nick Harris, Adam Schefter, whoever. I say, hey, look, here's the guy who said it. Here's his Twitter handle. This is his name. I'll even put the text on the screen. I'm not saying, hey, there's a guy that I saw somewhere that said this, right? No, I am legitimately citing my sources. And if you're going to attack someone personally and professionally, right, the goal of that hit piece is to make the person who talked about this, I won't say his name just to give him more publicity than he deserves. The goal of a hit piece like this is for you, the individual, to get money and attention on you at the cost of someone else. You're tearing someone else down to build yourself up, right? You could call that stealing. Some people call that stealing. I'll leave that up to you personally how you want to call that. I think that's wrong. Now, if you're being truthfully reporting and you're citing sources and you're citing a lot of evidence, that's one thing. That's journalism. That's not what this guy was. He had been out of the NFL for decades, out of the Cowboys for decades. No one knew who he was. He was a nobody in the sports media space, nobody in the sports space in general. And then he decides to come out of the nowhere with something like this. His incentives totally misaligned with reality. I don't know for a fact. I can't read his mind. But if you look at all the data points, that guy lied. Let me be honest, he was a liar. Right? Unless information comes out in the future that vindicates him from what we know today, he lied, he fabricated something to get more attention on himself. Regardless whether it was for a Cowboys player or my buddy down the street or whoever it may be, people that lie to benefit themselves at the degradation of others are not good people. We should not celebrate them. We should not give them the time of day. We should reject them wholeheartedly. All right, next comment here, talking about injuries and things like that in the National Football League is according to at TXZick. He posted, players spend months lifting weights, which constricts muscles and makes them tight, less flexible. NFL trainers need to put more importance on stretching as karate athletes do. Chuck Norris was very strong from weight training, but he spent a lot of time stretching, increasing his speed, and didn't suffer from the injury bug. Sean Lee was a perfect example of suffering pulled muscles far too often. Very true. Dak's injury last season was the same leg as his ankle injury, also suffering from getting the leg strong again without loosening, and probably why he tore it. I'm willing to bet Guyton didn't do enough stretching after months of building strength. This is actually a really important point. Tom Brady brought this to the forefront with his whole pliability thing. And, I don't know all the science behind it. I'm not a science guy. I'm not a doctor, of course. But it seems very interesting that the guy who had the longest career, longest successful career, maybe probably the greatest career in NFL history, was big into stretching and flexibility. And he had the one season with the major injury, and that was a knee, in 2007. So there is something to flexibility and stretching. I bring up the old adage that I heard from an NFL player in an interview one time. He talked about in terms of what the NFL is like. It's like being on an interstate with semis running at you. You don't want to necessarily bulk. If you're if you got a semi going at you, right? You don't want to be surrounded with armor and pads because that semi hits you. That semi is going to win. You actually want to be light and nimble so you can jump out of the way. And I feel like that can happen sometimes with players when they bulk up and get strength potentially. They work a lot on certain things. They build a really good physique. They get ready for the season, but they haven't necessarily worked, to your point, on stretching, flexibility, getting out of the way of the semi. So that way, when something happens, they're very tight, very constrictive, and things can pop. We've seen this actually a lot in the NBA with a lot of Achilles injuries as these athletes have year-round regimens and are in great physical conditions, and then they get stressed or dealing with ankles or other kind of issues, and then things just pop. Now, I don't know if that's what happened with Guyton, but you bring up a very interesting point. Stretching, flexibility. Tom Brady proved it. There definitely is something there. And I hope before long we're seeing that get back into pro sports across the board because we're seeing way too many severe injuries. Martin Emerson for the Cleveland Browns, their great corner, just had an Achilles injury. Should not happen. I think these guys they're focusing so much because they're told to on muscle mass, strength, diet, all of that, and that's very important. But flexibility and injury avoidance should be the number one concern. Maybe, and I hope you're right here, maybe we'll see more of that emphasis going forward in the National Football League and in pro sports in general. At Cedric Burdett asked, who is next man up until Guyton gets back? That's Nathan Thomas, apparently. Again, we talked about him earlier in this video. I think he's got a really good future in front of him. Schottenheimer had a lot of good things. He had a good offseason, so I think he's got a good opportunity to really earn some, I don't know if he's going to be a starter, but certainly a swing tackle kind of player. At JWSB482 commented, I believe Guyton doesn't need the rest. He needs reps. We're seeing better knee bend and hand placement. Iron sharpens iron. Yeah, this was in response to my commentary yesterday when I said maybe this isn't the worst thing in the world, right? Guyton had worked all off season. He had put his body in good shape. Training camp destroys your body. It can lead to a lot of fatigue and other potential injuries, like I mentioned a second ago. So the fact that Guyton got this injury now, maybe this is a chance to, work on the mental side of the game, get in the playbook, learn the new scheme, work on that stretching flexibility perhaps as he rehabs. He doesn't have to lose his body through the just the grind of training camp. So that was sort of my, kind of positive spin, half glass full on this kind of thing. And I didn't mean that to say Guyton doesn't need reps. He does need reps. But of all the guys and all the situations where if you do have an injury and miss the reps, Guyton isn't necessarily the worst. He did play a lot last season. He did get 5-6 practices in training camp. He got some confidence. He worked all offseason. The one question was going to be with his, how could he hold up? There's still that injury concern, but now he gets to take a step, kind of get rehab, continue to keep his physique in a good spot, get in the mental side. Again, I'd much rather him play and get reps than not, but I think of all the situations that could happen, this is not the worst one, him taking advantage of this opportunity to work on his flexibility, keep his offseason physique in at least some competent shape, and get in the playbook to get ready for week 1 or week 2 whenever he returns. So I don't mean to say that it's a good thing he got hurt, but I do think if all the things that could have happened, this is not the worst case scenario. All right. So there's some negativity on here. I don't want to give it too much play, but there was one comment from at Loney Barnes 2979 that I want to bring up. He said, Cowboys should have drafted Sanders for their QB. Nah, they too stupid for that. One of the things I love is that there is this sort of always belief that you're just drafting one quarterback away from solving the problem. That just hasn't happened. If you look at NFL history, it just doesn't, right? The Chiefs, they didn't draft they kind of, I don't want to say lucked into Mahomes, but they didn't evaluate Mahomes and say, oh, he's going to be as good as he was. They said, well, he's a good prospect. Alex Smith getting older. He's got some limited physical tools. Let's see if we can get Mahomes. Maybe he can develop, and obviously became a superstar, right?
That doesn't happen a lot, guys. Tony Romo was undrafted. Prescott was a 4th-round selection. Brady was a 6th-round pick. Jalen Hurts was a 2nd-round pick. Brock Purdy was a 7th-rounder, right? You can go down the list here. You're never getting the quarterback position one draft away from being elite, right? Because it's such a crapshoot. It's so hard to evaluate. With that being said, I like the Cowboys' approach, bringing in a guy like Milton. Last year was Trey Lance, or a couple of years ago was Trey Lance. I think Trey Lance, the time in Dallas was a disaster, unfortunately. But I like the idea of bringing in guys that have these high physical skill sets, like a Milton, to say maybe he can develop into something potential, kind of follow that Mahomes-ish strategy that the Chiefs used. I think it's the right approach to take. But again, you're never one quarterback away. You're never one draft away at that position because it's so hard to evaluate. You can go back to just a couple of years ago. There was people look at Trevor Lawrence. There's questions about him. He was supposed to be a generational guy. He was the next Andrew Luck or whatever. There's a lot of questions about how good is Trevor Lawrence, right? Zach Wilson was a total bust. Trey Lance was a total bust. Mac Jones, total bust, right? You can go down the list here. There's been a lot of quarterbacks that were high selections that, he's going to be a great one. All these physical tools, he's going to be a star, and they don't work out. Happens all the time. It's such a crapshoot. Don't get into the fallacy of thinking you're just one right quarterback away from being an elite contender, because guess what? It's almost impossible to get that done, because if it was that easy, every team would do it, folks. The reality is, it's unfortunate, but it is the truth. Quarterback, drafting it correctly is as much luck as it is skill. Otherwise, the Patriots would not have waited till the 6th round to select Tom Brady, and the 49ers would not have waited to the 7th round to select Brock Purdy. It is a crapshoot as much as anything else. And like any roll of the dice, you just need as many rolls as possible. Take a lot of bites of the apple. Take a lot of shots. I like what the Cowboys did with Milton there, following that strategy. All right, that's all the comments to address today. Later on this afternoon, we've got with my co-host a deeper dive into Gayton Blue with some interesting stats from the Cowboys running back position and some more commentary on that young running back who very quickly emerging as a star. So make sure you stay tuned for that. As always, if you have any comments or questions, put them below and I'll address them in tomorrow's video. But until next time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.